Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to FIDE Masters series, in which I will cover the round number 5 from the Polish First League. We got paired with a higher rated team, however on my board I was the one with the rating advantage, so it is a must-win situation for the team. How did it go? Let's see. And one more thing guys, I promised you the update on the previous match. We drew that match, so even though we were leading 2.5 to a half of a point, we didn't manage to win, so in the end it was 3-3, but let's go back to today's match and today's game. I got paired, as I've said, with the lower rated opponent, but it's not a big difference, so I expected a tough match. And obviously when you are surprised on the move number 1, that's usually the case. I did not expect Sicilian defense to appear on the board. I was expecting only e5 basically, so here we are. And my opponent chose once again the variation that I once played against during this tournament, which is 4 knight Sicilian. Perhaps he prepared something in the sharp line that I opted for those few rounds ago, in which, as you may remember, I went with knight b5, bishop b4, bishop f4. Perhaps he prepared it, so I changed things a little bit and I played a3, and he responded with d5. And I believe that d5 is not the best course of action for black in those structures, because oftentimes they get the worst pawn structure without anything in return basically, so I'm having a little edge over black, and I'm happy about it. So I was thinking about whether should I take on d5 immediately, or maybe should I play move like bishop b5. I believe it is also playable in such circumstances, but I opted for the first option, which is e d5, knight d5, knight c6, bc6, and this is what I was talking about. This is the pawn chain that might have a problem. After my bishop d2 move, trying to be, let's say, solid after any further exchanges, my opponent played bishop e7 and offered a draw. So he didn't have to really offer a draw, because by the style of his play during the opening I already knew what is his game plan. His game plan was to draw, which is obvious. As I've said during the introduction, this is the dynamic on our board. He is the one that is supposed to be drawing, the other guys from his team are supposed to be winning. For me it was the other way around, so obviously I didn't take a draw, also because I am objectively better. So I developed bishop to d3, and after castling my opponent went into 30 minutes thought process, so quite a long time. And I believe that's because he opted for this line expecting this sharpness on the board, but I chose rather a calm version of the 4 knight Sicilian, and he was stuck. He didn't know what to do perhaps, and he opted for bishop f6. I believe it was not the most critical option. I liked rook b8 more for black, or maybe some tries of pushing either of the pawn in order to activate the bishop, something along those lines, and I felt like this is what my opponent is calculating. Instead of, he opted for bishop f6, kind of indicating that he would like to exchange on c3, but I felt like it's not a big deal for me, so I just continued with queen h5, trying to hit the pawn, obviously with the checkmate threat, but my opponent protected the h7 pawn with g6, and my point was that after g6 this bishop might be weaker, and with my pressure here and there, I might be actually good enough for the opponent to exchange something not in the best way, and that's exactly what happened, meaning that he took on c3. Immediately I spotted the idea of trying to take on c6, because I'm hitting the rook and I'm hitting the knight. Taking immediately obviously does not work, since after bishop d7 the rook is protected, the knight is protected, and my queen is under the attack, so I'm losing material. However, if I changed the move order and I opted for bishop c3, queen c6, this is actually working. So either after rook b8 or bishop d7 I would be getting the pawn advantage there. But the problem was that I believe after bishop b2, queen a8, bishop a1, rook a1, and the point of queen b6, black is okay. I might be having, let's say, the queen that is looking active, but the point is that this queen is also amazing. It took control over the b file, bishop b7 is a threat, and so on, so I felt like I have no edge here. So instead of going for the such variation, at this point I took with c3 pawn. It may seem counterintuitive to do that, because I could have obviously played this line too, so the only difference is the bishop on the board, and it is visible that this bishop might be better than this one. However, I felt like with all those diagonals being weak, I might be having the potential to really change the dynamic and make my bishop the attacker and the other one, the opponent's one, the defender. So that's why I opted for this line. And to my big surprise, my opponent played bishop e5. I still don't know what's that about, because he is not creating anything like promising for him. This is obviously not a great test of threats, and like he's just giving me the c6 pawn, so I don't know what's that about. And I found out only after like two more moves, because after I took the pawn, because I can take it, whatever. He played bishop d7, I went back with the queen, and he played queen c7. And I was like, what is going on? First of all, he started to exchange all of the pieces in the opening, offering me a draw. And then he went even further, because he gave up a full pawn just to exchange more pieces. So I felt like he is playing for a draw too much. However, obviously, even after the exchange, it's not that winning position for me, because I have a pawn advantage, but those are those pawns, right? One of the c doubled pawns, so it's not easy to convert. But still, I have a risk-free situation position, so I was not sure about the game plan for the opponent, but I mean, this is what it was. Anyway, at that point I decided to play a bishop e4 move connected with rook f to d1. It took me quite some time to figure it out. The point is that I couldn't decide in here, should I play bishop e4, c4, rook a to b1, or maybe h to b1. Bishop e3, bishop h6, like all of those moves are similar to each other, can transpose to each other, and I spent quite some time here because I already had huge time advantage. And in the end I decided to go for the bishop e4 and rook f to d1 combination, because I am the one that will be creating some threats, either to the pawn or to the rook, so opponent has to be precise. And he surprised me one more time with bishop e5 move. I felt like it's yet another inaccuracy, however, I didn't know what else opponent is supposed to be playing, let's say, because either like bishop c8, bishop e8 are passive moves, so rook d8, for example, is also not working, because after bishop g5 I'm hitting the rook anyway. So the point is that maybe it should not surprise me that much, but still I felt like all the exchanges will favor myself, because as of now I can play bishop e3, hitting the bishop and hitting the pawn, and after bishop takes c3 I go for the forced line, bishop takes a7, bishop takes a1, takes, takes, takes. And as you can tell, I transposed my advantage a little bit, because instead of having just doubled pawns as my advantage, I exchanged one of them for the a pawn, so I now have two passers. And having two passers in an endgame is quite an achievement, so I was feeling more and more happy. As you can tell, Evil Bar does not show any happiness whatsoever, so seems odd, because I felt over the moon as of now, but I guess that's just the computer stuff. Anyway, my opponent played precise move bishop a4, and it took me, I mean, it should have taken me a while to figure it out, but based on the instincts I just played within like 1 minute. What did I play? I played king f1. Why? Because obviously this move is a very good one, since it's blocking my pawn and some rook b2 threats are on the board. However, if I just went king f1, king e1 and allowed my opponent to take on c2, the point is that my rook is amazingly placed, and as you can tell, Ivar bar is going higher and higher, because I can just simply push the pawn far up the board, then push the king, and the rook endgame is won easily. So for that reason, even though my opponent initially went for bishop a4, rook b2 continuation, he now spotted the fact that a rook endgame might be lost for him, so he decided to switch ideas and he went for king f8, trying to centralize the king, king d2, king e7, and as of now I still felt like I am winning in endless really variations, so I felt like just trying to activate my rook will be the easiest one, so I played king c1 with rook b1 as continuation, and my opponent took on b1. And at that point I was unsure whether or not should I really exchange the rooks, because maybe I should have gone like the other way around, like maybe, I don't know, king c3 with then trying to bring the rook around like this and activate it and keep them on the board. I'm not sure. At the time I felt like either the exchange of the bishops or the rooks should be still giving me a winning position, so I didn't think about it much, but at that point I got a little bit scared, because it will be quite hard for me to progress, mostly due to the fact that my passers are blocked and will be for quite some time, and my king is passive. So I have to figure out many things on the board uh, just before I will be able to start, let's say, making my advantage work for my sake. So how did I start? I started with king b2, king c3, which is obvious, and at that point I have a really interesting and important decision. How should I continue? How should I push my pawns on the king side? Because that's the case, as I've said. First of all, I have to resolve this situation, and when I, let's say, created some path for my king and I create some weakness and so on, then I might be thinking, okay, opponent will have to take control over the king side, protect it, and be cautious about it, and so on. And that's when my pawns, let's say, will be able to push. So it's still a long way to go. For example, one of the ideas that I had in mind was to play g4, because with the bishops on this color, having those black pawns on this same color would be advantageous for me. So I felt like, okay, if I will be able to push g5, I would be very happy. However, after simple f6, then perhaps bishop d7, I was not sure if such pawn move would be okay. As you can tell, computer already likes it, and perhaps that was the way to go. I'm not sure. However, I chose to take a simple route, and I just went back with the bishop to d3, trying to reroute it to the diagonal like this, and maybe then try to hit the pawn chain. And as of now, after f6, I have a decision once again what to do with the pawns, because I cannot delay it forever. So how should I do it? As I just said, with the bishops on the light squares, I should try to put my pawns on the dark squares. So for example, move like g3 and h4 would be the most logical continuation. Then I would be trying to place those pawns, all of them or most of them, on the light squares, and then try to both hit them and then push my pawns on the queen side. That would be the idea. However, I spotted one idea which might be a bad one because it's not logical. However, for me it seemed like it's a good one, and I played f3. So I played against this rule of placing the pawns on the opposite color, because my idea was that if my opponent will play f5, which, you know, you can feel it coming, I will try to play g4 myself, and with the idea that if he plays f4 in the future, this will be the hole, this will be the weakness that I can go like that, for example. So I was trying to create some path for my king to penetrate the opponent's king side, but it just didn't work out. Why? Let's check out the rest of the game. My opponent played f5 as expected. Also, one thing about f3, I was hoping to play bishop c4 as of now, but I was really unsure about such pawn endgame. Obviously, with outside passer, most endgames are like winning. However, I did not feel so confident about it because this pawn chain is so solid, and usually you have to move the pawn up the board so that your king has the way of going like that and grabbing all the pawns. I did not see those ideas, I did not see the concrete variation. So like yeah, that's why I played f3 in order to be better prepared for this bishop c2, if that makes sense, because maybe it doesn't. Anyway, after f5 bishop c4, right now I would be happier if that situation happened again, because what would I play? I don't even remember correctly, but perhaps something along the lines of a4, king b4, king d3. Now since the pawn is up a little bit, I felt safer about it, but now that I think about it, this f3 move did not make any sense whatsoever, but that's my problem. Anyway, after bishop c4, obviously opponent did not take, he played bishop c6. I hit the pawn, he went up, I hit the pawn, he went up, and as of now I had a critical decision how should I attack the pawn. So bishop e6 is the most logical, most tempting, and I would love to play that. I was just really unsure what will happen after e4, because I'm not sure if I like those exchanges. Too many pawns are off the board, and I believed that such position might not be winnable. That's the problem, and if not that, then what else? I was trying to calculate such variation too, but I was also unsure whether or not it will be enough, because in this variation I did not create any path for my king. Like, those pawns are solid, I cannot try to fight against them, let's say, so I was also unsure about it. So I was trying to stick to my idea which was harder to obtain. However, I felt like it would guarantee me a draw, so I played bishop g6 with the hopes of him playing f4, and as I've said, this would be the greatest of paths for my king. My opponent, however, decided to play bishop d7. He knew what I was trying to do, and as of now I decided to play king d3. I calculated many lines, but they all are, let's say, blurry in my head because they are so similar to each other. It's all about the tempos and the move order and stuff like that, but in the end the position does not change much. Anyway, after a check I went to e3, he went back, I went here, he went here to attack my pawn, and this is the critical moment for two reasons. One, this is the move number 41, so we are just after the time control, and not only that, I really have to do something about my pawn. And the problem is, should I go here, should I go here, or maybe should I protect it? What's the move here? And once again, the differences are so small, and there are only the details that differ from each other that I couldn't figure it out. And in the end I just, tossed a coin in my head and opted for c4. C3 perhaps would be the most sensible option because I still maintain the control over the dark squares, and together with my bishop, the king on c5 is staying alright, but he can never enter my side of the board, let's say, my half of the board. And c4 was more of a forcing line, let's say, but I gave up the d4 square for good, so I have to have the king like somewhere around it, right? So that's the problem. And how did the game continue? My opponent opted to plant the bishop on this diagonal, which was a good decision in general. And why is that? Well, if he played something else, let's imagine that he would have gone there, I would perhaps play g4 with the idea that I was talking a lot about, meaning that if this pawn moves, I will be able to push with my king, right? So if he takes bishop d7, I would be trying to play like this. As you can tell, Ivar bar just skyrocketed. Maybe it was something better here, maybe like bishop g6 trying to get this square. No. So as you can tell already, this position, even though computer still likes it, gets very tricky for black, and this is thanks to this hole, right? After f4, similar thing happens. So yeah, that was my idea. However, after bishop c8, I felt like my opponent is fighting against it, because as of now, after g4, once again, I was not sure if this amount of pawns will allow me to win the game, because it feels like there are too little pawns on the king side. I would rather have 3 against 2 or 4 against 4. 2 against 1 felt like, okay, my opponent might be trying to just exchange those 2 pawns for this one, and then try to take the pawn like that, and then the king would be close to this pawn and so on. I know I may be a little bit not convincing because I'm still hot-headed, let's say, but that was my thought process anyway. So for that reason I decided to play h3, and I've completely missed the h5 idea. I mean, I did not miss the move, I missed the idea. What's the idea? The problem is that if I play bishop f7 that I was originally planning to do, after h4 my g-pawn is stuck. I will never ever be able to push g4, and for that reason those pawns will never allow my king to enter the position. So like, how am I going to break through the king side? I'm not sure. And as you can tell from the beginning of the bishop endgame, let's say, those pawns barely moved, only this one moved once, and that's that. So those pawns cannot move further. Those pawns are on the wrong color, as you can tell. So yeah, I felt rather clueless. So for that reason, after h5 I decided to play king d3, trying to go this way and maybe try to push like that. And my opponent went with bishop d7 anyway, king c3, h4, and now is the time for me to try to give my opponent a move and create a zugzwang. And I decided to play bishop g8 with the hopes of him either moving from this diagonal, allowing me to play, let's say, bishop e6 and making this f4 move possible finally, or going away from this diagonal and allowing me to play move a4. So if the bishops move here or there, I could have tried this or that. However, he opted for g4, going for the simplifications, and at that point I felt like, okay, winning chances are slipping away faster and faster. Not only that, I took automatically, let's say, with h pawn and I got once again very hot inside of my body, same stuff as in the previous game. Maybe you watched the analysis, because I spotted the e4 idea for the opponent. Complete breakthrough, and the problem is that you know, those are the pressures, and if I try to take here or there, h pawn might be, you know, quite fast, right? So now that's the one variation. The other would be like that, and now h3 is coming. So I felt like I might be even losing, and I would not forgive myself for losing such a position ever. However, just before I started realizing what's really the matter in those variations, my opponent simply recaptured with the f-pawn and offered a draw once again. So it shows his, let's say, approach to the game. He was not thinking about winning at any point, but this e4 move was really scary. The point is that I would actually be able to hold this, because h3 is not working that well, since I can push my pawn actually and promote it with a check. So at that point, I believe opponent should have taken with the bishop, and then now after bishop d5 and then f4, I would be actually holding this position, but it's still really unclear. It's all comes down to one tempo, I believe. I'm not even sure if that's how am I drawing this. f5. I have to give away the pawn, right? Because after bishop c6, the bishop is gone, the pawn is running. So yeah, as you can tell, I would have to find the only moves in order to save myself. So not an ideal situation when we are pushing for the win with one more pawn, right? But anyway, after f takes g4, takes, a4, finally, he then exchanged even more pawns. So even though I have finally pushed this pawn a little bit, it's still like a no-go, no win for me, unfortunately. And after a few more moves, which was a5, bishop c8, king d3, bishop a6, very precise move, king e4, king b4 takes. Oh, sorry, I did not take. So the obvious variation could have gone like this. Now that's a draw, but I wanted to be a little bit, let's say, tricky and stuff, because after king d5, I just basically was trying to give away the bishop with the hopes of my pawn being promoted. But obviously after king c5, a7, bishop d5, it will be still a draw. But you don't have a points for style in the game. I wanted to be stylish because that's what I was left with, since I did not convert a better endgame, perhaps even objectively winning. So yeah, after king d5, my opponent took here, and then on a5, so I took the bishop, and now that's how the game ended. So I had the bishop at the end, but obviously you cannot checkmate with the bishop, so I drew the game. I couldn't convert, and it was a very big disappointment also for my team, because as I've said at the beginning, I was the one that was in the must-win territory, and also my win would have given my teammates a lot of let's say faith in at least drawing a match, because at the time of me finishing the game, it was 0-2 for my opponents. So if I won, we would have had 1 versus 2 points, and then still would be fighting on 3 other boards for something positive. However, after my draw, all the other boards drew their games too, so it is, I believe, 2 against 4. If I'm not mistaken, we lost the match. And yeah, we are not happy as a team. I am not happy individually, so there are a few lessons to learn. One of them will be bishop endgames are not easy too. I believe this will be the thumbnail of the video. And yeah, this is it. I spent once again 5 hours grinding my way. I couldn't do it, so and that's that for this video, for this analysis. Thank you all for watching. Let's check out the review, and we'll see what's the result there. But I hope for a good one, because I have to admit that I checked the engine, like, was there a win anywhere, but apparently it was not. So also my opponent did not play as bad as I expected during the opening. So like I'm not so sure what's that about, because I felt like I have to have like +2 or +3 or whatever, but that was not the case actually. And yeah, I believe that the review is lagging a little bit. So yeah, 96 as you can tell. Oh wait, once again I was leading for some part of the game and I couldn't convert, so sometimes it's just like that. And what can I tell you guys, pretty disappointing, but hoping for a resurrection tomorrow. So give a like to this video, and we'll see each other in the next game once again with the fighting spirit. Thanks you all for watching, and see you. Bye bye.